In 2004, the top 1% of the population held approximately 43% of the financial wealth in the United States, with the next 19% holding about 50%. This leaves 80% of the population with only 7% of all the financial wealth in the United States. Who wins? Wealth can be seen as a resource that is very useful in exercising power, which is very obvious when we think of donations to political parties, payments to lobbyists, and grants to experts who are employed to think up new policies beneficial to the wealthy. It can also be useful in shaping the general social environment to benefit the wealthy. Certain kinds of wealth, such as stock ownership, can be used to control corporations, for example. With the top 20% of the population owning nearly 90% of the stocks, one can see how this translates into the most power being concentrated into the hands of a relatively small portion of society. Who loses? The aforementioned figures make it very difficult for the bottom 90% of the population to get organized and exercise much power. Raising awareness on the distribution of wealth and power and how multinational corporations in particular use it to gain even more control over global resources is a pertinent issue to consumers concerned with balancing the already grossly unequal distribution of wealth in the United States and around the rest of the world.
What we've moved from is what we ideally describe as a market economy to a capitalist economy, which is defined by enormous concentrations of wealth and where the whole economic system is controlled by money and the interests of money rather than by the interests of people and community.
Companies such as Fiji Water make millions of dollars annually through their international sales of bottled water. In America, Fiji Water has become a favorite amongst movie stars, musicians, and supermodels, and is often seen in television shows and in movies. The sad truth of the matter is that while Fiji Water is thriving, over 1/3 of the population of Fiji has no access to safe, clean drinking water. Families throughout Fiji are being forced to drink highly contaminated water from local streams and are dying as typhoid and other waterborne diseases begin to sweep through their communities. The clean water shortage is so devastating to the country that local hospitals and schools are being forced to close due to water problems. This shortage is forcing children out of their educations and taking jobs from hard-working people. In July of 2009, the Fiji government approved of a 20-cent per liter export duty on all mineral water exports. The bottled water tax was proposed to correct this imbalance by stimulating the conservation of water for local communities, whilst at the same time increasing government revenue. Bottlers responded by ceasing production and stating the new tax structure made it highly unprofitable for our industry to bottle water. The tax was dropped after the water company threatened to close. The water companies, along with Fiji Water, were more than willing to close their factory than to help prevent sickness and death in their own community. Fiji Water's lack of concern for their own community's resources and health is a prime example of some of the inhumane practices of predatory capitalism.
It's a contemporary form of slavery, they call it slave labor. But they don't prosecute them cause it's how they make paper. When you rockin' that fly shit that's made in China by an 8-year-old child trying to feed his mama, he exposed to contamination and disease. And only 55% of them will get degrees. And the women have to try to placate the boss because of sex discrimination in the labor force.
More and more, American companies are resorting to the outsourcing of jobs formerly held by Americans to cheaper labor forces found in second and third world countries. Sweatshops, which are oftentimes a result of the practice of corporations outsourcing jobs, subject workers to grueling hours, few breaks, little to no pay, and a host of abuses including physical, mental, and sexual abuse that show little regard for their humanity. Many large corporations knowingly reap the benefits of this cheap labor, but distance themselves publicly from these practices of which they are fully aware of as inhumane by using third-party contractors to supply these extremely cost-effective labor sources. This is an example of increasing poverty on both fronts. The pervasive reach of capitalism is sacrificing American jobs only to fund a virtual slave labor force. Many of the countries that are being preyed upon have no recourse in the matter of these abuses, as they are victims of structural adjustment programs put in place by IMF, World Bank, and World Trade Organization. These structural adjustment programs put pressure on local governments to privatize their economies at a cost that makes local sustainability nearly impossible. With the collapse of their local economies, working in sweatshops is one of the few means of survival for communities caught in the grips of unregulated capitalism.
All of this information begs the question, what can we do about it? In some cases, corporate regulation may be a viable solution. However, such regulations are constitutionally obligated to affect small independent businesses as well, which often serves to hurt the local community more than help. Instead, a better plan may be to try to change the municipal laws governing business in the local communities so that they specifically target major corporations. We can also do more as customers that these corporations rely upon. We can be aware of what the corporations are doing with their money by keeping up with business news or by looking into the financial reports that the corporations release, which can be found most easily on a company's website. And if we have concerns about what a corporation is doing, then it is important to voice our concerns publicly in order to help raise awareness and put pressure on the corporation to change how they do business. If we can convince a corporation to utilize more sustainable business practices, then that corporation will be poised to truly give back to the community on both a local and global scale. Perhaps most important, however, is that we as consumers have the power to choose where we do business, to choose which companies we support. We need never feel obligated to fund these enormous corporations, especially if we want to help the businesses and programs of our local community.